Before the world knew Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, the gruff, fierce, and unyielding mutant with adamantium claws, there was a moment when everything hung in the balance. A moment so fragile, so full of doubt and uncertainty, that his entire future as a global superstar could have crumbled with a single decision. It was the year 2000. Hugh, then a promising but relatively unknown Australian actor, had spent years honing his craft on stage and television in his homeland. He had tastefully picked roles, always careful to choose parts that allowed him to grow. Though his charisma was undeniable, Hollywood had yet to recognize the magnetic presence that would later captivate millions. When the audition for X-Men came knocking, Hugh saw it as just another opportunity, another role to try out for in a sea of unknowns. But this wasn't just any role. It was the role of Logan, better known as Wolverine, the troubled anti-hero whose raw power and relentless spirit would forever change the landscape of superhero cinema. The stakes were enormous. Hugh knew the role would demand everything he had, physically, emotionally, mentally. It was not simply about flexing muscles or delivering lines. It was about embodying a character who was both fierce and vulnerable, a man torn between the beast inside and the humanity he desperately clung to. But even more daunting was the question burning inside Hugh's mind. Could he truly become Wolverine? Could an Australian actor capture the rough edges and brooding nature of a Canadian mutant who had lived through wars and heartbreaks? What if audiences rejected him? What if he wasn't tough enough, rugged enough, or simply didn't fit the part in the eyes of fans who adored the comic book legend? The fear was paralyzing. Hugh wrestled with his doubts day and night. The pressure wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Hollywood was a harsh and unpredictable world, and taking on such an iconic role could either catapult him to unprecedented fame or trap him in a typecast role he could never escape. Moreover, the toll the role might take on his personal life was equally unsettling. His wife, Deborah Lee Furness, had always been his anchor, a voice of reason in a chaotic industry. Together, they had built a life grounded in love and support. But a sudden leap into Hollywood stardom threatened that stability. Filming schedules meant long absences, public scrutiny meant loss of privacy, and the emotional strain meant risking his mental health. In quiet moments, Hugh would sit alone, staring at the script, wondering if the gamble was worth it. Friends warned him about the traps of fame. Mentors advised caution. Even his agent, while encouraging, sensed his hesitation. The studio executives, on the other hand, were growing impatient. They believed the film could be a blockbuster, a fresh take on the superhero genre that would redefine it forever. They wanted Hugh. But the longer he hesitated, the more the stakes grew. "I was terrified," Hugh would later confess in an interview. "Not just of failing the role, but of losing myself in it. Becoming someone else and not being able to come back." The character of Logan was dark, violent, tortured, and endlessly conflicted. To play him well, Hugh would have to dive deep into his own fears and vulnerabilities. That meant exposing parts of himself he had carefully guarded. In the midst of this inner turmoil, a critical crossroads emerged. One path led to the safe, familiar world where Hugh remained just another working actor in Australia, carving out a modest career. The other was a leap into the unknown, accepting the role that could either break him or make him a legend. As the audition day approached, the pressure became unbearable. His agent called repeatedly, reminding him of the opportunity. His wife encouraged him gently but firmly to follow his heart. The fans, unaware of his struggle, waited for news of his casting. In those final hours, Hugh almost made up his mind to walk away. The fear of failure and loss had overwhelmed the hope for greatness. It seemed easier to retreat than to face the daunting challenges ahead. Then, as if fate itself intervened, a chance encounter altered everything. That night, at a small gathering of actors and filmmakers in a dimly lit room filled with smoke and soft jazz, Hugh met an old, seasoned actor who saw through his doubts. The man's words cut through the fog of fear like a beacon. "Son," he said quietly, "you don't become a legend by playing it safe. You become one by stepping into the fire, by embracing the risk, by fighting for the role that scares you the most." That single conversation reignited something inside Hugh. It was not just encouragement, it was a challenge. A reminder of why he fell in love with acting in the first place, the chance to transform, to take risks, to tell stories that mattered. That night, Hugh made a choice. Not just to audition, but to give everything he had to the role. To embrace Logan, claws, darkness, and all. Little did he know, that decision would not only redefine his career, but change the face of superhero movies forever. After that life-changing night, the conversation that ignited his courage, Hugh Jackman found himself standing at the threshold of a new reality. The role of Logan, the tortured mutant known as Wolverine, was no longer just a possibility, it was his next great challenge. But the journey from uncertainty to full embodiment of the character was far from easy. The audition process was intense and unlike anything Hugh had experienced before. It was not merely about reading lines or striking the right pose. It was a crucible that tested every part of him, his physique, his spirit, and his soul. Directors and producers wanted to see not only the man who could wield claws, but the one who could portray the savage heart beneath. Knowing the physical demands were immense, Hugh threw himself into training with a rigor he had never known. Days began before dawn with grueling workouts to build the muscular, rugged body that Wolverine required. Personal trainers pushed him beyond limits, sculpting his physique to match the character's iconic look, a wild, unstoppable force barely contained by humanity. But the physical transformation was only the surface. The deeper, more profound struggle was emotional. Logan was a man haunted by his past, a warrior burdened with pain, rage, and a longing for peace. To capture this essence, Hugh had to dig into his own reservoir of emotions, facing fears, doubts, and vulnerability that few ever saw. He recalled moments from his own life, the sacrifices he made for his family, the moments of loneliness despite the spotlight, the quiet battles fought within. These memories became fuel for his portrayal, breathing life into the conflicted mutant. His performance needed to resonate not only with comic book fans but with anyone who had ever wrestled with inner demons. Filming was an exhausting, often punishing process. The fight scenes were choreographed to perfection, demanding hours of rehearsal and takes. Hugh endured injuries, bruises, sprains, and the occasional cut, but never faltered. Each scar became a badge of honor, a testament to his dedication. On set, the pressure was palpable. Fans of the X-Men comics were fiercely protective of Wolverine's legacy. The weight of expectation was enormous, and Hugh knew that one misstep could alienate the devoted audience. Yet instead of buckling, he welcomed the challenge, eager to honor the character's depth and complexity. Behind the scenes, his wife Deborah Lee Furness remained his unwavering pillar of support. She kept him grounded, reminding him that beneath the claws and the rage was a man of integrity and kindness. Their bond grew stronger through the intense months of filming, a quiet sanctuary amid the chaos of production. Hugh's commitment extended beyond acting. He studied Wolverine's history, the comics, the mythology, the essence that made the character beloved. He worked with coaches to perfect Wolverine's distinctive gait and posture, embodying a man both human and beast. When the film finally premiered, it was clear that Hugh's gamble had paid off. The audience's roar was deafening. Critics praised his performance as magnetic, raw, and authentic. Wolverine was no longer just a comic book hero. He was a living, breathing icon, and Hugh Jackman was the man who made it so. Looking back, it was astonishing to think how close Hugh had been to walking away from the role. The fears and doubts that once threatened to stop him were now distant memories, replaced by the pride of having conquered the beast inside. This moment wasn't just a career breakthrough, it was a personal triumph. Hugh had embraced the darkness, faced the unknown, and emerged not only as Wolverine but as a symbol of courage and resilience. And the story was only just beginning. With the roaring success of X-Men behind him, Hugh Jackman's life changed overnight. The character of Wolverine wasn't just a role, it became a defining part of his identity, the role audiences worldwide now associated him with. But with great success came unforeseen challenges, pressures that would test not only his physical endurance but his mental and emotional resilience. Almost immediately after the film's release, Hugh was inundated with offers to reprise Logan, invitations to conventions, endless interviews, and fan meet and greets. The global audience was enamored, and the pressure to live up to the character's legacy was enormous. Fans expected authenticity, passion, and the ferocity that made Wolverine iconic. Yet behind the scenes, Hugh felt the weight of expectation like a constant, unseen burden. The fear of being typecast gnawed at him. Would he ever be taken seriously in roles beyond Wolverine? Could he prove himself as a versatile actor, or was he destined to be forever that guy with claws? The physical demands continued to escalate. Each sequel required even more intense training. The claws came with new choreography, fight scenes grew longer and more brutal. Injuries accumulated. There were times Hugh pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion, his body bearing the scars of commitment. On set, Hugh found himself in a strange paradox. While Logan was a man of rage and violence, Hugh was a deeply thoughtful, introspective individual, committed to his family and craft. This dichotomy often left him wrestling internally, how to balance the primal energy of Wolverine with his own grounded nature. More than once, the grueling schedule and emotional intensity led Hugh to question whether he could continue. The stakes were high. One misstep, one slip in performance, could disappoint the legion of fans who had come to expect greatness. Yet, every time doubt crept in, Hugh reminded himself of that fateful night, the Crossroads, the conversation that changed everything. That memory anchored him, a beacon of purpose amid the storms. Beyond the cameras and spotlights, Hugh sought balance through his relationships and personal values. His marriage to Deborah Lee was a sanctuary, a reminder that he was more than a character, more than a star. Together, they navigated the challenges fame brought, keeping their life rich with love and humility. Hugh also began exploring other creative outlets, musical theater, dramatic roles, even humanitarian work. These pursuits fed his soul and allowed him to grow beyond the Wolverine persona, proving his range to audiences and critics alike. But Wolverine remained at the core. It wasn't just a role, it was a part of Hugh's soul. His dedication transformed the character into a living legend, a figure who embodied pain, hope, and resilience. The journey was far from easy. The weight of the claws was heavy, sometimes crushing, but Hugh bore it with grace and fierce determination. And yet, despite the immense pressure, despite moments when the future seemed uncertain, Hugh never regretted the choice to embrace the role. It had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately made him a star. But the story behind that choice, the doubts, fears, and quiet battles, remained largely unknown to the world. Years passed. Hugh Jackman had become synonymous with Wolverine. The character was iconic, beloved, and inseparable from his name. But fame, like fire, has its own unpredictable nature, sometimes warming, sometimes burning. By the time Logan was in development, Hugh felt a shift stirring deep within. The once electrifying role that had launched his global career now weighed heavily on his shoulders. The physical toll had accumulated countless hours in the gym, injuries that never quite healed, the relentless need to be on for a character that demanded everything. More than that, Hugh sensed that the story he wanted to tell was no longer just about action and spectacle. He yearned for depth, for a narrative that revealed the man behind the claws, the vulnerability, the frailty, the humanity of Logan. But this vision was risky. Hollywood was known for sequels, for big-budget extravaganzas. Logan was different. It was raw, gritty, and carried the heavy mantle of being potentially the final chapter for Wolverine. If it failed, it could close the door on Hugh's relationship with the character forever. This uncertainty brought back the old doubts, the same fears that nearly made him walk away at the very beginning. Would the audience accept this darker, more mature portrayal? Would he be able to carry the weight of such a somber story? Was it time to finally let go? Behind the scenes, discussions with studio executives were tense. Some wanted a blockbuster full of action and CGI, others were hesitant about the tone Hugh pushed for. Hugh found himself at yet another crossroads, between commercial expectations and artistic truth. At home, the toll was also felt. Hugh's wife, Deborah Lee, had been his steadfast partner through all the highs and lows. She saw the strain and the toll on his spirit. Yet, she also saw his passion and understood that this was more than a role. It was a defining chapter of his life's work. One night, as the pressure mounted and the weight of expectation threatened to suffocate him, Hugh found himself alone in a quiet hotel room, reflecting on the journey. He recalled the early days, the auditions, the fears, the almost decision to walk away. How far he had come. In that moment of quiet, a revelation dawned. This wasn't just about playing a character anymore. It was about honoring the story of a man, flawed, broken, yet fighting for redemption. It was about embracing the pain and the hope intertwined in Logan's final journey. Fueled by this clarity, Hugh doubled down. He threw himself into the film with a renewed sense of purpose. The physical training was brutal. He lost weight to portray an aging Logan, his body showing signs of wear and fatigue. He worked closely with director James Mangold to craft a story that was intimate and raw, far removed from the bombast of previous superhero films. Filming Logan was an emotional odyssey. The cast and crew often spoke of the profound energy on set, and understanding that they were creating something special, something that transcended genre and expectations. Hugh found moments during shooting where he truly connected with Logan's pain, the loss of loved ones, the isolation, the fight to keep going despite everything. These moments were cathartic, both for the character and for Hugh himself. When Logan premiered, it was met with critical acclaim. Audiences were moved by the gritty realism and emotional depth. Hugh's portrayal was hailed as his finest work, a testament to courage and vulnerability. But behind the accolades was a man who had faced his demons and come out stronger. The journey had come full circle from fear and hesitation to embrace and triumph. And yet, this was also a farewell. Hugh knew that this chapter was closing. Saying goodbye to Logan was bittersweet, a release from a role that had both defined and challenged him. He reflected on that first terrifying crossroads, amazed that he had found the strength to take the leap. The choice to embrace the role, to fight through doubt and fear, had shaped his life in ways he never imagined. When the final credits rolled on Logan, an extraordinary journey quietly drew to a close, not just for a beloved character, but for the man who had brought him to life for nearly 2 decades. Hugh Jackman stood at a crossroads once more, but this time, the path ahead was less certain, yet filled with possibility. The decision to take on Wolverine had been the most shocking, and arguably the most defining, choice of his career. There had been a time when fear threatened to hold him back, fear of failure, fear of losing himself, fear of becoming trapped in a single role. Yet, he chose to face those fears head-on. That choice propelled him into global superstardom, binding him forever to a character that demanded not only his physical strength but the depths of his soul. Logan was more than a film. It was a powerful farewell to a hero and a man. It captured the fragility beneath Wolverine's fierce exterior, the loneliness, the pain, the desperate hope for redemption. For Hugh, it was a deeply personal story. Through the grueling filming and emotional performance, he peeled back layers of vulnerability that resonated far beyond the silver screen. But saying goodbye was bittersweet. For years, Wolverine had become a part of Hugh's identity. The gruff voice, the unmistakable gait, the claws themselves, all etched into the public's perception of him. In interviews, on talk shows, at fan conventions, he was often that guy with claws. Stepping out of that shadow was a challenge. After Logan, Hugh sought to rediscover himself beyond the character. He returned to the theater stages he loved, embracing musical theater with open arms. His radiant performance in The Greatest Showman marked a triumphant reintroduction, a joyous contrast to the dark, intense mutant he once embodied. It showcased his versatility, his charisma, and his boundless energy. Simultaneously, Hugh deepened his commitment to philanthropy. He became a passionate advocate for education, children's health, and humanitarian causes, using his platform to amplify voices and spark change. For Hugh, it was a way to give back, to bring light into the world beyond Hollywood's glare. Throughout this period, Hugh remained grounded and humble. He often reflected on that pivotal crossroads, the night he almost walked away from Wolverine, consumed by doubt. That moment was a reminder that the greatest opportunities often come disguised as challenges. In candid interviews, Hugh shared his journey with honesty and wisdom. He spoke about the importance of vulnerability, the necessity of risk, and the power of perseverance. His story resonated with many, not just actors, but anyone who has faced uncertainty in pursuit of their dreams. Fans and colleagues admired Hugh not only for his artistry but for his authenticity and resilience. His journey became a beacon of hope, proof that fear could be overcome, that doubt was a natural part of growth, and that courage was often about simply choosing to continue. Looking back, Hugh saw Logan not merely as a character, but as a symbol of transformation. The claws that once seemed to confine him became tools of liberation. Through that role, he had learned about pain, endurance, and the delicate balance between strength and vulnerability. Today, Hugh embraces the future with open arms, ready for new stories, new challenges, and new versions of himself. No longer shackled by fear, he is free to explore, to inspire, and to live fully. The untold story behind Hugh Jackman's most shocking career decision is ultimately a story about the human spirit, a story of fear faced, risks taken, and triumphs earned. It is a testament to the power of choosing courage over comfort. And for Hugh, the journey beyond the claws is just beginning.